Yeah, hello and welcome to a new episode of our weekly Spielworxx chat season 2. My name is Uli Blennemann and I'm having a wonderful guest today, the famous game designer and writer Geoff Engelstein. Geoff, how are you?
I'm doing great, Uli. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And hello, Chris. Good seeing you. He's also greeting you, Geoff. Chris from the UK. Before we start, let me mention one important piece of news. Well, important to me. Next week there will be no Spielworxx chat, and this is only the second time till April 2020 because I'm on holidays in Bavaria. So my wife and I will hike at the Salzalpensteig, so this is probably Salt Alps steep path, which is a long road through Bavaria for hiking. And so we'll move for 1 week from the Chiemsee to the Königssee. And this is if we make it to Bavaria, because it seems that the trains are on strike again, so could be could hinder us. So it will be exciting, but I don't want to go by car to Bavaria, but we'll see. So no Spielworxx chat next week, and I'd like to mention the Zenobia Awards. The finalists have now been announced, and I mentioned these awards here several times. And I would like to congratulate to all finalists, but also to everybody else there. I saw so many great entries. So please check out the website, and there are also two YouTube videos, and I will post the URLs here quickly. So this is for the website, and then we are having two YouTube videos. So this is probably the URL chat again here. So sorry that this takes so long. And
Yeah, and I would like to echo that. The finalists are just a great batch. I'm on the board of Zenobia and also help mentor a few people. Unfortunately, didn't have the time to participate in the judging up to this stage, but yeah, the entries are just I think more than what anyone would have hoped for in terms of just the different types of stories that they're telling and the backgrounds and everything. It definitely encouraged people that are interested in simulation gaming to go check those out.
yeah, absolutely. So I was blown away by the breadth of the different topics there, and by the energy of the people. So really outstanding stuff. And there's also Mo. Hello, Mo from Texas. Good seeing you. And there's Jason from Canada, and he's saying, looking forward to hearing some more about Triumvir. So yeah, and Geoff has to do all the work because I'm just asking a few questions. So again, it's easy for me. So please introduce yourself, Geoff. What are you doing, and how and why did you start gaming?
Um, yeah. So again, thanks for having me. So yeah, I mean, I've been gaming for a very long time. I first started in kind of more hobby or simulation gaming back in the early 70s, when well, mid 70s, I guess, when I was a kid, and I started playing Panzer Blitz, and Richthofen's War was the first kind of, non-mass market game that I ever owned, and played a lot of diplomacy, and, just kind of have always been involved in the gaming world. And then started doing some podcasting around games, specifically on the Dice Tower, the game tech segment there, which I still do this day. I've been doing it for about 12 or 13 years now, where I talk
Wow.
about psychology and science and math, and how that all relates to gaming.
Mm.
And just from there, just got more and more interested in game design, started designing my own games, and talking about it with people. Started the Ludology podcast, where we had a lot of
Yes.
fantastic guests, and
Yes.
so that was always exciting. So yeah, and just I've got about 12 published games or so at this point. Most recent two were actually Versailles 1919, which I'm
Hmm.
sure we'll touch on, and
Yes.
Super Skill Pinball, which I guess I do a lot of diverse, quite diverse collection of
Yes.
games. And also I've done a bunch of books about game design as well, including Building Blocks of Tabletop Game Design, which is probably the most popular one I've done, which is with
Yes.
Isaac Shalev, which is an encyclopedia of different mechanisms and things for the budding game designer.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. You see, this is a wonderful overview. So there's so much Geoff has been done and is doing. And I featured here the book you were mentioning here. And if you are thinking you are a gaming pro and do not have this book, you are not a gaming pro. Same thing with ludology. I said this here too several times. If you only have time for one podcast, gaming podcast, it has to be ludology. So that's for sure. But you already briefly mentioned game tech, which you are still doing, and it is
Hmm.
maths, science, and news, and insight into the world of gaming. So, what exactly, although there is this line, so what exactly is game tech here?
Uh, so yeah, from a podcast standpoint, I started. Just to give a little bit of history, kind of I think explains it best. Is uh, Tom Vassell, who started the Dice Tower, he was living in South Korea for many years, and for business, I would head over there, and when I went over there, started hanging out with him, and so he just mentioned to me one time. He says, "Hey, I'm looking for." It was kind of like a variety show format at the time. He had a lot of different contributors, and people came on and off. Moritz Eggert from Germany was
Yes.
a frequent guest on the show, and so I've always been interested in kind of connecting different things. There was actually a BBC show called Connections. It was on called The Ascent of Man. There was a book called Gödel, Escher, Bach by Douglas Hofstadter,
Mm-hmm.
where he takes different music and art and all these different things and kind of combine them together. And I've always been intrigued with like games are such a central part of human experience.
Mm.
Going all the way to this, even board games. Go back 10,000 years or so. That we found the first evidence of dice and throwing sticks and things like that. Um, that it touches on many, many different aspects of the world. And I always like to say, okay, this, you roll dice when you play Monopoly or you play Risk or whatever. How does that relate to some larger thing about
Mm.
probability or some other thing? So using it as a way to
Mm.
take the familiar and perhaps help teach people about other things.
Mm.
So yeah, so we talk about and when I first started it, I thought maybe I could do maybe 10 or 15 of them, the segments, and
Mm.
then I'd be done and I'd have used up all the material. But I've done it pretty much. I do about once every 2 weeks. I do it, and I've been doing it for like I said about 13 years now. And there's
Yeah.
always something new. I've got a upcoming. I have to record tonight. Is I'm doing a, pentathlon of 5 stories about that came out of the Olympics. So that's my next thing. It's just some interesting game related news that came from the Olympics. So that'll be tonight.
So wonderful. So, and there is already a question by Matt. Hello, Matt. Matt Wolf, the designer. Do you ever worry about running out of topics for game tech?
I did at first, and now I've decided that it's just going to be sort of a bottomless pit of this. There's always some crazy thing that's coming out. So
Like
yeah,
the Olympics.
yeah, exactly. There's always something. But yeah, like I said, when I first started, I really really thought I'd do like 10 to 20 game techs, and that would be it. And now it just keeps going. And in fact, I also just started a newsletter,
Yeah.
a game tech newsletter, to kind of supplement the podcast and also, be able to dive into some more in-depth information about, how you actually do, certain types of calculations, or how you can use Excel to do certain types of things and, get a little more mathy on stuff, but also, just have general essays and things. So that's also been fun to work on.
Yeah, and I just posted the URL to the newsletter. So it's really great stuff, and I think it comes out weekly, if I'm not mistaken. Or is,
Yeah, I'm not holding to that. Yeah, I'm trying to do it like once a week or once every 2 weeks. We'll kind of see. I've only done 6 issues so far, but I'm going to see how the material comes in. I'm not going to stress myself out over it. So it's kind of like as Geoff has time, sort of newsletter.
okay, sounds good. And there is also a designer, Daniel Newman. He's saying hi, Geoff. So yeah, and
Hi,
by the
Dan.
way, I have to quickly mention that Daniel has a Kickstarter which started today. So check out Repas on Kickstarter. It's live, and please support Daniel in this fantastic game of New Mills Industries. And if you have some questions or comments, please post them in the chat window. But now we come to the topic for today, to your forthcoming game Triumvir. It is to be published by GMT Games, and you are the co-designer. So the other designer is Mark Herman. So what is Triumvir? And for me, who hasn't have a lot of knowledge about ancient times, what is the historical what is the historical situation?
So Triumvir is covers the end of the Roman Republic, and right one of the right towards the end there was a triumvirate, basically three factions that kind of joined together to rule. So one was led by Pompey, Crassus, and Caesar, and they, officially they were supposed to like switch off being consuls and had different roles and kind of were kind of co-ruling, but it was challenging to keep together, and ultimately ended with Caesar taking the troops that he had in Gaul and crossing the Rubicon and starting the Roman Civil War, and eventually taking over as dictator and emperor before he was assassinated. So we cover basically the events leading up to the Civil War. And it's really designed, as the name would imply, kind of strictly as a three-player game. If you don't have three players, then there will be bots that you can use that will substitute in for the other players. But it's really intended to be a three-player game, so it's not like 2 to 4 or whatever. I mean, I guess officially it's 1 to 3, but it's really designed around 3. So you take over one of those. You are either Caesar or Pompey or Crassus, and you are leading that faction and trying to become the first man in Rome.
And are these three factions or people that you are representing as a player, are they different, or is Crassus the same as Caesar, or has Caesar special abilities that Pompey does not have, or how is this handled?
Yeah, each one of them, yes, each faction does have a special ability. It's not super heavy-handed. It's not like a wizard versus a fighter kind of thing. But they do have little edges. So just in broad terms, there's 3 kind of currencies that are used, what we call types of influence. So there's military influence, there's money, and there's popularity. So those are kind of the three things that you're exchanging. And in general, Caesar is better in the military realm. So when there's uprisings and things like that in the provinces, he's better being a governor of provinces or conquering provinces. Crassus is the best in the money realm, so he can recover money faster. And Pompey is better with, on the popularity side. And if there's revolts inside Rome itself, then he tends to have a bit of an advantage in that area. So they do have slight edges, but there's certainly ways to compensate for them, and it's not gonna, it doesn't dominate gameplay, but there is a little bit of a twist.
Yeah, this sounds interesting. I think this is also good for complexity. So if everybody has 10 different abilities, then this would be surely too much. But
Yeah.
Triumvir belongs to a series that is not really a series, isn't it?
It's a philosophical series, I guess, more than a mechanical series. Yeah, I would say, well, Triumvir is very much based on the system that we developed for Versailles 1919, which is the game that was released about a year ago from GMT, which covers the treaty negotiations around the end of World War One. So if you've played that game, if you're familiar with that game, Triumvir is very similar in terms of the way. There you go. It's beautiful. Look at that. So the basic system of issues, where you're trying to settle issues and placing influence on issues, is still, that core is still there. So one of the things I really very pleased about with Versailles is it's each turn is very fast.
Yes.
Most part, your turns are very quick. You only have like 3 different decisions, things that you can do on your turn. You have to pick one of 3 different political actions. And so there's a certain kind of focus and directness to it, and a rhythm, because things get exhausted and
Yes.
use up your resources, and then one of the actions you can take is to get your resources back. So we kind of built on that system, and but we've kind of gone in different directions, because where you're still kind of dealing with these issues, in essence, are coming up before the Roman Senate. You're basically proposing things before the Roman Senate. But then how they impact things is very different than in Versailles. Versailles, you're kind of remaking the map of the world, and different regions would become upset or not, and your own personal people would become upset or not. But in Triumvir, we're focusing on there's 2 main tracks that you're on. So the main one, which is really also tied into the victory, is the Rome tracks. So there's 3 strata of Roman society that we reflect: the patricians, the plebeians, and the military. So most of the things that you do will impact what's called your standing with each of those. So there's no more happiness in Versailles. There was like an overall national happiness. That's gone, and that's replaced by the military may love you, but the patricians may hate you. Thing. So you track things individually on each of those. And then, as I mentioned, there's 3 different types of resources, whereas in Versailles there was just one. So now there's military resource. It's called legions, money and influence, popularity. And when you're bidding for issues, each issue you can bid any type of currency, but when you place, each one has a special matching currency. If you place the matching currency, then that amount is doubled. So there are certain issues that are more important to the military, that are classified as military issues, and if you place legions on those issues, they count double than if you put money or other things. So that adds a little bit of texture to another layer of intrigue to that process. So before I get into other details, you kind of mentioned that it's part of a series. So yeah, it's anyone that has played Versailles is going to be on very comfortable ground when they do this. Officially, Versailles and Triumvir are both part of the Great Statesman series, which was started by and was done in it was Churchill and Pericles, right? 2 of the games that he did in that series. And those 2 games are very different from each other, but they're kind of in that. The idea is the concept of kind of a push and pull of history and of influence, and trying to nudge things the way you want. Churchill, nobody plays the Axis powers in Germany in there. That's at the end of World War II. So you're playing. The 3 players are Russia and UK and France and the US. And similarly in like Versailles, you don't play nobody's playing Germany, right? You're playing the victors that are trying to figure out how to divvy it up. But mechanically, all the games are quite different.
Absolutely. I have to briefly look into the chat. There is a certain Mark Herman, and he's asking, "Hi, who's your guest today?" And I think this is Geoff, Mark. So great, great seeing you here, Mark. And Jason has a question: with Caesar presumably out of the country for a chunk of the game's time frame, of doing his thing in Gaul, do you reflect this in the game? Okay, so
not directly. I mean, what we do is we have, and a lot of them were out. I mean, Crassus, he went off to Syria to fight. In fact, he was killed out there. And so, what you're representing is you are kind of the individual, but you're also kind of the faction, right? Okay. So we're not directly. There were some, direct historical things, like you couldn't be consul twice in a row, or there's certain things with an individual, but we're not kind of modeling it to that level, right? Where you're an individual person. There's games like Republic of Rome, the old Avalon game, which is just a fantastic game, which gets down to that level. But we're representing that you're a faction or a party, basically. So the fact that Caesar's away, the idea is that he's still sending messages, and he still has Mark Antony and other lieutenants that are, kind of helping mold the action of what's going on in Rome itself.
And yeah, I absolutely, and let me show it again. I absolutely love Versailles. And actually, last year, Geoff and Mark and we were playing on at the same time at the virtual table, and I really, really enjoyed playing. Not so much that I always lost against these two brutes,
I
but
think you always lose. I am terrible at Versailles. In general, I tend to be terrible at my own games. So,
no, I've another. My memory is different here, but I really enjoyed it. And one thing, what makes Versailles and I think Triumvir also special is that both the length or the game length and the complexity are fairly low. So it's easy to get into the game, and as Geoff already said earlier, downtime is really very, very low. So your turn normally is very fast, and this makes it really exciting. And at first, if you may read the rules of Versailles for the first time, you could get the impression that it's just another majority type game. So there are issues and you place cubes on them, and at a certain time you score and you get some points if you have the majority of cubes on an issue. But really, there is so much flavor in there. There is table talk between the four, or in Triumvir, probably three factions in here, so that, and the cards, they give the game a soul. Suddenly you are in the game. So this is what I really, really love about this title, Versailles. Getting back to Triumvir. In Versailles, as I just said, there are four factions. So you have some table talk with three other people. Triumvir has just three factions. How does this change the whole momentum, the whole flow of the game? Or doesn't it?
um, I think it still has a similar feel. You can still make the same types of deals with people. I think there's actually even more opportunity for deal making in Triumvir. Another system that we have in that we did not have in Versailles for obvious reasons, once I describe it, is that there are elections that come up. So there are offices that can be held. So there is the consul. So one faction is gonna have the consul position. There's the oh great, now Mark's in and I'm getting performing there because I can't remember. There's like the religious leader whose name is escaping me at the moment. And then there are five governorships for different provinces. So Gaul, Hispania, and so on. So we've got five different provinces that you can be part of. So and obviously, so there's only three different factions, right? So each faction is going to get multiples of these. So at certain points, when events come up, there's two types of events. There's events that happen instantaneously, and then there's events that trigger when they slide down the board, and so you can kind of see them coming. So there are some that are called elections. So when an election card comes up, then people have the option of bringing it onto the table, and then once it's on the table, then the next time an issue is settled, there will be an election, and at that point, people can use their influence to try to whoever basically bids the highest influence will get first pick of the offices, and then there's like a snake draft from whoever bid most to bid least of going down and up to get these. And then there's going to be one office left over, which is kind of interesting because that the consul, whoever the new consul is, gets to give that to one of the players and can give it to themselves if they want to. And sometimes you don't want it though, because a lot of sometimes the governorships for each province, there's an unrest in that province. Like a hostility towards Rome. And if it's really high, there were certain random events that can trigger, just like in Versailles, there was an unrest track for different regions of the world. If you're in this case, it's the same kind of thing where there's an unrest track for each province. But if a province is really high, then if there is a rebellion, then you have to use any legions that you have available or money that you have available to try to put it down. If you don't, so the effect, it only impacts the governor. So if you're the governor of Gaul, if Gaul revolts, only the Gallic governor has to worry about it. But they have to use their resources to try to put it down. If they fail to put down the revolt, then bad things happen to them. But if they succeed, and if the unrest is high enough, they can even get a triumph.
Mm.
which will give them, pretty serious benefits to happening. So like Caesar is very good at putting down that stuff. That's his special ability for that faction. So if you have a faction that's in terrible, terrible shape because it's been mismanaged by the last governor,
Mm.
the new consul now can, it's a bit of a poison pill. They can assign it to other, and there can be sometimes pretty serious negotiations about trying to
Mm.
avoid getting it, or, well, yeah, I'll give you this if you don't do it, or I'll do this or whatever. So that's a whole other axis now for players to interact with. But at the same time, it's pretty straightforward.
Mm.
So when you've got the governorship, so the consul has certain special abilities that they can do. Consuls get to, kind of select. It's they can help point the direction of new issues that come onto the table. They get to break ties. The and then the governors, when there's certain governor events come up, they can actually try to tax the provinces, and they can tax them at different levels. So they can try to get a lot of resources out of the province, but that pushes up the unrest. But if there's an election coming up, hey, maybe you'll go for that and do it
Yes.
and stick somebody else with the province later when there's a problem. So, and historically, of course, there was a lot of uprisings in Gaul.
Yes.
Crassus went to Syria to try to put down a rebellion and was actually killed out there. So that really reflects a lot of the realities of what was going on with these provinces, and the way that the provinces were managed by the governors is a lot of them, like when Caesar was in charge of Hispania, he used it as a little piggy bank to help finance his political ambitions.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting. And this now, if you just listen to this, makes me already excited playing the game whenever it is out. But it seems on first glance terribly complex. But if it's within the limits of Versailles complexity, I can tell the viewers it's pretty low complexity. Everything
Yeah.
is straightforward, and a lot of the game, like Versailles, is in your head. Here, a lot is happening on the table. This is all pretty easy. And Mark is there. Now, first, I have to say hello to Uftata, but Mark has a term. It's Pontifex Maximus.
Oh, thank you,
So
Mark.
it's
I was
always
just about to look it up. It was driving me crazy.
it's always good having a mark. It's
Yeah,
always good.
yeah,
And Jay Foolsgard is saying it sounds really neat, and I have to agree. You mentioned, Geoff, it's basically a three-player game. It makes sense to have three players in this
yeah,
environment. But especially during the pandemic, but I think it will stay in the future. Solo gaming has become more and more popular. And you mentioned it's 1, 2, 3, and GMT is very good with solo bots in their game. So there will be a
yeah.
special solo bot for
There's
this.
going to be solo bots for the different factions. Yeah, and we tried something a little different for Versailles as a solo game,
Uh-huh.
which I kind of came up with the idea for that system initially, and I completely stole it from another designer, whose name is Mark Herman.
Ah,
Um,
again, this mark.
so going back to Peloponnesian War,
Mhm.
Mark's game from it's probably the 80s, I guess, maybe the 90s, but I think it was the 80s. One of the things I loved about that game is that you actually played. It was just really a solo only game, but you played, and then when
Yeah.
if you didn't win as one side, eventually you had to switch and take over the other side. So if you really beat the other side down mercilessly, then all of a sudden you switched and you had to play them
Yeah.
and claw your way back up. And I really loved that dynamic, and has always been, felt that was one that had been underused in by
Yes.
game designers. So thought it was an opportunity to use that here. So that's the way we implemented the solo game. So in Versailles is that when you so you play in a period, if whenever there's an uprising, you have to switch to whichever faction is in last place. You only get points basically if you're in the faction that's leading. So if you dash too far ahead of the pack, when you're leading a faction, you have to, it's going to be harder when there's a switch for you to claw your way back up into first place again. So I love the system. I think it's really intriguing and different things.
Mm.
Got kind of somewhat mixed reviews. Some people really liked it and enjoyed the challenge. Some people didn't, just thematically felt like, hey, I was the U.S. and now I'm Britain and now I'm France. So what's really, it
Mm.
became more of a puzzle than a game in that sense. But so we're going back to a more traditional bot system in
Mm.
for Triumph.
Okay. Okay, although I really think that in Peloponnesian War it works so nicely. And as you said, Jeff, it's hasn't been used enough because it's really it builds up tension in a nice
Yep.
way. And I think so. The game was first published by Victory Games, but I think the GMT edition is still available at this moment.
Yeah,
So
it was just redone, so it's definitely readily available now.
yeah, a great game. So check this out. But Triumvir, it's on P500. It hasn't made the cut, so the game will be published by GMT
Yes.
Games. So when is it about to be released or expected to be released? BGG, the BGG page says, and I posted the URL, it's out this year. This is not going to happen, right?
Definitely not. Yeah, I'm not sure how that year got put in there. Yeah, I would guess, based on everything that's going on with, lead times and pipelines and shipping and everything else that's, it's stuff getting
Yeah,
pushed back.
yeah.
Honestly, I am anticipating this is going to be a 2023 release. I'll be surprised if it comes out in 2020. If it does come out in 22, it would be towards the end of the year. Um, but I think it's probably most likely going to be first or second quarter of 2023.
Okay. So yeah, Mark is confirming that it made the cut, and he's agreeing no chance for this year. Yeah. What you don't know, Mark, I put the 21 earlier at BGG today, so I typed it in now. I would never, I would never do this. But people,
Yeah.
please, if you have an interest in a great political system, really neat political system, fairly low complexity, please go to the
Yeah.
GMT website and please pre-order the game, because although it made the cut, doesn't if your pre-order may make an impact because the more
Yeah, it
orders the
absolutely
game
does because the
has.
ones that are higher get earlier in the queue, they get the resources, and you don't get charged. I mean, unlike Kickstarter, so Kickstarter, like once the Kickstarter ends, your credit card gets charged instantly. That's not the way GMT works. For those of you that haven't done a GMT P500 before, they don't charge the cards until right before it's being produced.
Yeah.
So you can cancel your order anytime up to then, and they even give you a little warning. They're like, "Hey, we're going to start charging your card for this thing in." So you can cancel
Yes.
your pre-order because usually by that time the rules have been posted and
Yes.
there's a lot more artwork, so you can make an informed buying decision. But yeah, if you get your thing in the queue, you get your order and it's really, uh, you can back out of the commitment. We prefer you didn't. I'm sure
Yeah.
GMT would prefer you didn't.
All right. Hopefully, I haven't lost you now, Jeff. It
But
may. Are you back, Jeff? Hopefully, you're getting back here.
but
There you are again. Hopefully. We
yes,
have.
sorry about that. What
No, no,
happened?
no. It happens. You're back. So it was just for a
Okay.
couple of seconds. And Nick is there. His taxi service ended, but late again. Yeah, we are now closing or almost close to closing, and you arriving. So too bad. But we are having a question here from Jay Foolsguard. Did you work on trade on Tigris, or did your work on trading on Tigris influence the design of versailles and Triumvir?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, those are
Different
really
types,
focused on the
okay.
trade mechanics and the
Yes.
civilization trade mechanics. So no, not really. But hey, I love Trade on the Tigris. I mean, it's just, it got great reviews. But I was disappointed in just in terms of the sales and stuff. It's just, there's just so many games that come out now. It's just hard sometimes to get noticed. Games come out and disappear. And unfortunately it was one of those, but yeah, if you have a chance to check that out, I'm a huge fan of that game.
Yeah, it's a very nice game, and because I saw Nick here, or I'm seeing Nick here in the chat. We played the game at Laria. I'm not sure with you, Nick, but in Portugal a couple of years ago, and we really liked it a lot. So, but it's a different
Thank you.
beast than Versailles
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
Triumph. Totally different game. Yeah, and in J
But yeah,
Foods.
but Versailles, Versailles, and I think Triumvir, same thing. Like you're saying, it's not, a lot of GMT games are like, heavy war games, stuff like that. Where people, I have played, usually, sometimes drag kicking and screaming into a game of Versailles where they're like, oh, I don't like war games, I don't like battle, I don't, I'm not really into, history or whatever. But it's a different, it's much more of a, a Euro game kind of a style
Yeah.
in that, but it really is evocative of the history, and that's what we're going for with
Yeah.
Triumvir as well. It's really, I'm describing some other systems that are in there, but it's really, when you sit down to play it, it's really quite straightforward and simple, and the same mechanisms are reused over and over again, just in slightly different ways.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So, yeah, looking at the time here, thank you very much, Geoff. It was really a pleasure having you here. And let me repeat, I suggest anyone check out Versailles, which is available, I think, at this moment, which is
Yep,
Imprint. And
it's still
please go
available.
to the GMT website if you have an interest in Triumvir. Please pre-order the game. So the world needs more good three-player games anyway. So and this is what I'm thinking.
Yep.
And how?
Thank you. And also, I've got my new the next iteration of Super Skill Pinball is coming out in another month or so. So it's called Super Skill Pinball Ramp It Up, which, for those of you that played the original, it's got 4 brand new tables. It's a totally standalone version. So, if you don't have the original, you can purchase that. And I think it's actually being released in Germany under the name Flippermania,
Yes.
which is going to be coming out soon.
Yes, it will be out. So for you German brutes here viewing this, it will be published by Frosted Games, by my good friends of Frosted Games, and I think it's supposed to be out at Essen. So
Okay.
in October, maybe a little bit earlier, but please check out Frosted Games. They have a website, they have a newsletter. It's a German edition of this game, so please check this one out. And how can people best reach you, Geoff, if they want to reach you?
Yeah, so on Twitter is where I'm most active. I am at G Engelstein, which is GenGelstein. Or you can email me directly. I'd be happy to chat with anybody if you have any questions at jeff@ludology.net. Will get to me as well.
Okay, great. And there's a final comment here from Matt Wolf. Flippermania needs a dolphin themed table. So yeah.
Hey, if you I'll definitely take that under advisement. That's true. Flippermania, it's right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we close, let me remember you. So next week there will be no Spielworxx chat, and on August 31, Claude Sirois will be my guest. We will talk, or we'll take a detailed look on his game, The Smoky Valley, which will be out or available for pre-order in September. Thank you all for your time. And if you have a question that you'd like to ask in advance, or have a topic that you'd like to suggest to me for a future episode, please drop me a mail at uli@spielworxx.de. That is uli@spielworxx.de. So till then, remember, no chat next week. Bleibt alle gesund. Black Lives Matter. Bye bye. Bye bye.